What you can control, what I think is obviously entry points, how you set up the business from a capitalization perspective, within reason. I mean, ultimately your dream is 100% your personal net worth. And I think also who you partner with and your skill set behind, and that's through that education. So that's a brilliant analogy. And I love, that I try to tell my kids that is, part of sports is yes, getting physically fit, but those life skills and lessons that you get to bring through in business, and you see it, whether it be leadership, adversity, etc. But I think those are the important and that's a good point to focus on those is understand what you can control. But the price of oil will go up and down. Use my energy space is what we positioned the business. We believe to be true. We sat down and we challenged each other for 5 years. Are we sure? Do we think we can do this? Can we actually cut these costs? Do we see these things now it's evolved over time, of course, over 5 years. And I think that's it is just being laser focused on that, because if you succeed, then you can pat yourself on the back and say, I did what I did because we focused. We got lucky. Prices went up, something happened, etc. And if it fails, as terrible as it is, you can go back and reflect, something changed. There's an external incident. Something happened that, can you imagine being the guy that just bought, a movie theater the day before? There's a movie theater down the street that just opened up, and literally its opening day was March 15th, 2020. Well, it's been closed for 18 months. And you can go and say, well, we did everything right, but we just couldn't survive. Because of COVID, whatever. But I think that's it, is to understand that. And it keeps your mental sanity, quite frankly, as an entrepreneur, because, you have a customer coming in, but I'll add to that, but also continually recheck those beliefs, because, you open your front door and again, you open up the coffee shop and you're looking, it's like, oh, okay, interesting. Nobody's come through the front door. Well, I did everything right. Well, hold on. Has something changed? Was there a Starbucks open down the street? When you looked at the business case a year ago, you were the only coffee shop in town. Now there's a Tim's and a Starbucks and a this and a that. It just continually recheck. Not that you want to change your business plan like this. There's times you have to because a huge external threat like a pandemic or an economic shock. But I think that's a very good life lesson and skill lesson, whether it's sports or in business, is really that control and be reasonable and understand. Because that will also get you into business. If you think, okay, I can put in $100 or $1 million, what's real? What does that mean? If $1 million, you can be fully levered, or you're going to own nothing and just have $1 million in debt. Okay, well, you can do it. I can control the amount of debt I have. Well, hold on. What about this? And, you have to sort of work that out, because it's sort of that multi-dynamic, multi-situational problem that you have to solve for. It's the two individuals that are main in the business. Met many years ago, and there was just a personality alignment, but also a recognition that we complemented each other, and the skill set that they have are very different from mine, excuse me. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You have to get in business with people you can trust. So these are individuals that have gained my trust over 10 plus years. They trust me completely. And trust is not just you're not going to steal $10 out the door. The trust is you're going to call it the way it is with no hidden agenda. And you're going to say, you know what? I think you're wrong because of this. And you can separate that personal and professional and sort of business. So it was a long time coming. But I recognize sometimes in business, you get thrown in. You have a partner, if you start up a company and you have private equity backers and they throw you in. Well, look for common threads. What can we work together? And that's where also setting up processes is a business. If it's by yourself, you can sort of run it as required. If you have business partners, have process, have controls. A simple thing of having dual signing for check. As silly as that, don't you trust me? Of course I trust you. But my goodness, wouldn't it be terrible if $100 went missing out the front door and you lose a friendship over nothing? So it's making sure if you're getting into a position where you're maybe not, have some controls and structures, have a partnership agreement, etc. But I go back to a lot of my personal trust, people that you can depend on in a pinch, and you have that years of working together. And I go back to that reputation. It goes the same way. Is this something where lots of people I've met in business, I wouldn't trust them with 2 cents. And that's fine. They're business people. They've got their own way of doing things. But I just chose different partners to work on this Lucky Strike opportunity. Meeting with people, having that humility to say, I don't know. And I'm going to come back to that meeting with people, because every organization that I've joined, larger organizations, and get to know senior leadership. And it's sort of that, act as if, get yourself known, get that experience, ultimately getting that face time. And I don't want to call it FaceTime because FaceTime is a double-edged sword, but it's getting their reputation, getting involved with as much as possible. Every organization that came in, I'll think of the oil and gas and I'll think of banking. When it came to oil and gas, I had the traditional, they said, John, you broke the mold. You're the traditional CFO with the debits and credits. And every now and then you showed up with a checkbook and you write some money. Well, I was the first CFO to sit with my VPX at Tangle Creek and say, tell me what you're doing. How can I give you some help? What can I do? Teach me what. I was at humility. Tell me I don't understand. Well, by the end of our journey together at Tangle, she would consult with me about drilling opportunities, not from a technical. I couldn't tell you porosity from permeability, but I was able to get that trust and respect and saying, I trust your judgment as a business professional. And I found that other organizations, when I went to the bank, get involved with many different projects, people would actually inbound calls and say, John, can you sit on this committee? Can you talk to me about this? I understand you don't understand credit cards or retail or agriculture lending, whatever it may be, but they had that trust and discipline and respect to come and reach out to you. So as a young professional, the ones that I always admired were you can call it hustle, going out, and there's an art, being too intrusive, but going in and having a conversation and going and saying, this is what I'm doing, putting your hand up, bringing new ideas, showing that confidence. It's difficult, you have to learn your space, but I think that is such an important, I think it's served me very well. And I go back to, I've never gotten a job posting on LinkedIn and, throwing my resume. It was all people that I knew that I reached out and said, hey, I'm thinking of a change. Johnny, we love you. Why don't you come and work over here? So I think of, no matter what you do is do it good, do it hard, but diversify and knowledge, especially in a large organization. If you do choose to join a, consulting firm or a bank, or a big company, get as much experience as possible and diversify your skill set within the organization, get known and get a bunch of people to know you. Because if you get siloed in, it's dangerous. You could be the best person, but you're siloed now. And I've seen that brilliant men and women that I just literally cherry picked because I got to know them like, you're amazing, but you've had this unfortunate, this sort of siloed growth. Let me come over here. And they've turned out to be amazing, but nobody was willing to go and kind of pluck them until you go and tap on the shoulder. So maybe of all the things you can say the others work hard and et cetera, but I think that served me so well and, extended into my entrepreneurial experience because I had that reputation. I knew enough people. I focused on, the technical side and the financial side. Guess what? I could cross when I started the company. I wasn't a stranger to these vendors. I wasn't a stranger to these people as they came over and joined and worked with us. I think, the networking is meeting as many people, but just really diversifying that skill set and knowledge and expertise. And it's even within your core. When I think of university, I did my finance undergrad and, maybe I had the benefit of living in residence. And part of that was I got to meet men and women from all disciplines. So again, I got to learn and what are you doing? Get to chat and kind of diversify from there. So I think it's just expanding, get outside that sort of comfort zone. And I'm not saying be a politician and go shake hands. And then ultimately, when you come out, guess what? All these men and women that you've graduated with, we're all starting out. I get it. You're all starting out doing the worst job possible, working like a dog, making nothing. But guess what happens in 10 years? All the graduates that you graduated with, some are going to be CEOs, some are going to be CFOs, some are going to be business owners, and you keep that relationship. So I think it's ultimately, you've got your core friends and business, but keep those connections going out. When you graduate, you know what? Go together. A virtual beer in a COVID world, or heaven forbid, go out for a beer and just kind of meet up, or just a chit chat. How you doing? Got time for a coffee? Got time for a lunch? What are you doing in your space and industry? Because I think that's just so important in spending that time. It is a time commitment, but it served me very well. And again, if there's demands of family and things, fine. And one thing I'll wrap up with that is volunteer. I didn't speak to it earlier, but if you Google me as an example, service to society and service to community are so critical and important. And I think the reputation that I've got through those ventures, 99% of it is you don't do it for the glory. Of course, you don't get paid, but it's amazing when all of a sudden somebody from City Hall knows you. You can go into the mayor's office because you volunteered on a city board. You have a chance now. So you have a reason to go in because they've seen you at your finest. And I think something like that volunteer that you folks are doing right here is just kind of building that network, getting to people out. It will go, I assure you, in 5 years, people will say, hey, I remember seeing you. Do you remember this? And keep that connection. So it's a busy, it's tiring, recognizing you have a life and family and friends, but I think it's getting diversifying and meeting as many people as you can. And again, trying to balance that virtual and in-person meeting as well.
Definitely, yeah. So hint, hint, anybody who's watching, SFC is always ready to take on new people. I have another question about, so you had mentioned trying to keep Lucky Strike to a kind of a manageable size and not growing too fast and putting all the eggs in one basket. Are there certain advantages that like smaller oil and gas companies might have over the giants?
I When we started out, we had a grand debate about whether having a website or not. And the website, if you look, it has our address and phone number, and that's about it. And the reason was it's fly below the radar screen, and nobody knows who you're doing, what you're doing, you become. And I think there is, I mean, at the end of the day, an ability to cut costs in a business. If you're in an oil sands, it does not make sense to be a junior oil and gas company. When you've got 10, 15, we've got 40 physical oil wells, well bores, having that small decision tree, having that ability to be a little nimble, having a different risk tolerance, not from an environmental or skill perspective, but trying something a little different. Hey, as an example, we've got in a big company, a pipeline integrity program. So you're actually putting physical balls down to a pipeline that checks and does, sends meters to make sure you've got good. The traditional cost was 80, 90 grand. Well, you know what? We just finished one. We put one down a pipe, and there's a new vendor that came out and said, hey, we think we can do it for 5 grand. This is interesting. Well, guess what we did? We put our old one down, 70, 80 grand. We put this one behind it to go and test it. And the results are 99.5%. It's being able to do in real time. You know what? We're in the field today. Why don't we go do it? Guess what we're going to do? All of our pipeline integrity testing is going to be this new company because we just cut our cost 90%. In a larger organization, this is a best practice. We have to do this. We have to go and test and verify. So it gives you a little bit of nimbleness. And being private too, you saw that the ability to shut in production. Finally, as an industry, we're realizing, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Somebody realized their Excel spreadsheet says, wait, if production goes down and prices go up and make the same money, perfect, heaven forbid. So I think being able to respond in real time, because let me tell you this, if oil goes down to 30, 40 bucks, Lucky Strike's production will be zero. And that's okay. We're going to shut it in and just say, we're just going to wait. We're not going to sell our product at a below cost environment just to show growth. We don't have to grow. I said value. That's very different from growth. So if there's an opportunity, we're going to capitalize right now. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to stop. So I think it's a bit of a balance. What you do lose though with the big companies, that expertise is the 100 geologists sitting in a room. We have one. 300 engineers. We have one. 100 accountants. We have one. Like you got to be very careful. And again, go back to what you don't know and just be careful that you don't blow up the business and making a decision because you think you have all the answers. I think, coming into it, I had the benefit of dabbling in everything, ultimately still having this great exposure to Next Hydrogen, still a difference in E3 metals as well, and in Lucky Strike. And I think it just came down to, ultimately we just believed, I go back to those spreadsheets, when you looked at a value, we're a bit industry agnostic. We have this expertise, we know it, we understand it, but industry agnostic in that we said, okay, what do we think we can make money at? Where can we go? We have this on knowledge. We found this under-loved asset, and we went over to exploit it. So, possibly being the benefit of being private as well. If people don't like us, well, they can't find us. Who cares? I'm accountable to my shareholders, and there's a few of us, and that includes my family. So there's different accountability. Ultimately, what drives there. So I think, an unpopular. I would suggest in business, there's certain popularity, but ultimately do the right decision. What makes sense from a business perspective? What can you control? I couldn't tell you how to make a better mousetrap, how to make a better cell phone, but I could tell you how to make a better oil well and pump to optimize that production. So I think it was just knowing what we knew, went in and taking that leap of faith, ultimately. But the leap of faith knew that even at $40 oil, we were going to make money because we're going to focus on costs and getting that low cost production to market. Two things. You did your job, and then when you got comfortable, I think what's the old saying is, you planned, you worked at the next level of job. Do you know what I mean? When I think of investment banking, I started as an analyst and the slave, working like a dog, and that was brilliant. And ultimately, you get comfortable, and then you start giving ideas to. Now, this wasn't senior leadership all the way to John Hunkin was the CEO at the bank, but my managing director. Hey, what do you think about this? We talked ABC oil and gas. Have you thought about this? A little bit. And the good leaders, you're going to bounce off. If he or she is a real piece of work, they're going to take it, dismiss you, and throw you in the side. You know what? To their failure, and ignore them and move on. But there's going to be some that are going to go in and say, hey, this is interesting. Tell me more. They're going to help you. Hey, you know what? I think your idea is worse here, 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 here. Perfect. Learn from that. I think of every business I've gone to, when I went to another bank, went to the treasurer, hey, we need this liquidity. Have we thought about this perspective? You know, this is my expertise. So I think it's just in your little world. It doesn't matter what your job is just trying to add that little extra value and you know, reaching out. It's as simple as an email. Have that comfort. Hey, I've got an idea. You know, I think we can do things a little better. This is what I've observed. And if you're wrong, that's okay. You know, obviously don't be throwing just mud at a wall and see what sticks. You know, be some thoughtfulness. And heaven forbid, it might have taken an evening and a weekend to do a little bit of work when I think of my banking days and say, here's an idea, you know, have we thought about this? And guess what? You talk to people, you get different ideas, bounce ideas off friends, different colleagues. I mentioned the network of people outside of oil and gas and finance that I met through university. So I'm just a big fan of that, just ideas, because you learn something. When I come back to business, I do believe 80% of business is the same. It's people, it's profit, it's government, it's regulations. The 20% is the secret sauce. How do you make that great pizza? How do you make that great widget? How do you make a great profit on oil and gas well? That's a secret sauce that's very important. But that 80%, so when you talk to a business owner or a business leader, you have a commonality. You might not understand their business. How do you make lithium from brine? I don't, you know, how do you do that? Well, I don't understand it, but you generally understand. Well, how are you going to reconcile the cost of funds, you know, doing a project startup when you're raising $1 billion? Oh, okay. Well, now you're talking my language. So I think it's just, it's adding that value, working at that next level. You know, when you're a senior, a junior, think of a senior level. And then when you're a senior, go to the next level and kind of build. And people will notice that. The good organizations that you want to work with will pluck you and they'll help you rise up. And if they're not, well, maybe you have to go on your own. You know, those good ideas. And if people stop believing it, one day you go, because investors will. Somebody will go and say, that's a heck of an idea. And, you know, we'll finance that. But I think you know, I go back to education and building that skill set. Everything, that bedrock comes from a strong educational foundation. And that also includes life skills. You know, it's not just your textbooks and kind of building, you know, it's building human. I think of, you know, you know, that human intelligence, EQ, you know, emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, is how critical and important that is. And just listening to people, understanding and getting a broad diversity. And I think, you know, those guys are just exceptional individuals, and you know, they're created something. Their mind is different, but for everybody else, you know, having a bit of humility is important. Having that education, which gives you that foundation, that gets you that foot in the door, and then it's your smarts. But you know, it still goes back to, I still do T accounts. There's still a fundamental core to, okay, how am I going to debit this? You know, you pull it up, and that's kind of basic accounting 101. But ultimately, you know, it's to me, it's the 2 + 2. Fine, you can learn that. That's your education. The key is then developing that. So what? 2 + 2 is 4. What does 4 mean? And that's that next level, and sort of thinking through that. So education gives you that base to calculate 2 + 2, and I hope it gives you that next thought. So I think it's continually improving, and again, self-improvement, not just on an education. That's important. I mean, don't discredit it. You have to finish and get as much as possible that you can afford, and how much you're interested in as well. Getting that personal intelligence, expanding your knowledge in space when you're young. You know, I know there was a question once, we learned coding and things, and I have no, you know, question. Never understood that. I can barely run an Excel spreadsheet at times, and you know, there's certain things, and that could be going, but ultimately, you know what? But there still are the dreamers. I mean, the end of the day, business owners, if everybody's a coder, who are the artists? You know, who's making that? I mean, I think even Einstein said something along the lines is you know, without imagination we have nothing. You know, ultimately Steve Jobs wasn't the best coder, but he was the most brilliant sort of mind to develop and dream up this sort of next generation technology that we all have in our hands and changes the world. So I think it's just, you know, it's old fashioned. Nobody likes hearing it. Hard work, stick to itiveness, etc. And that's very grandma and grandpa, but it is core, and people still in this world still realize, and whatever that is, it doesn't matter whether it's in business or in personal, do it right. And learn as much as you can through that process.